So as we get into the demo here, one of the things you're going to see in the dashboard on Tufin is the ability to be able to go through and understand exactly what's going on in your infrastructure. So I mentioned that centralizing visibility. This is actually a dashboard that's pulling in all of your firewalls, your routers, your switches, and your cloud accounts. So your AWS or your AWS accounts, your Azure subscriptions, your GCP projects, and being able to actually identify those things, group that all together, see how many firewall rules you need, and then it's actually taking that information, allowing you to build some cleanup trends around it, so you can understand, how many shadowed rules, disabled rules, or unused rules you have across that environment. It's also looking at things like compliance trends. So we're going to get into security policy a bit here, and rules that violate your corporate security policy. Right, so it allows you to help visualize kind of that current state of your segmentation and the current state of that cleanup, and then how you can actually start refining this policy. So the first thing that we're going to get into is actually visualizing that current state of your segmentation. We're going to start with the zones. So you saw this briefly in the spreadsheet or in that screenshot in the presentation. But what you're going to see here with the zones is that you're actually going to have the ability to go through and you can manually create zones, things like this. So you have the ability to create a zone name and do that. You have the ability to view all of your zones and the subnets that they're a part of. This is both IPv4 and IPv6 already. And then you also have the ability to build zone hierarchies and nest zones within each other. So when I talked about things like building tiers of like application, you might, I have Amsterdam ext here as a zone, and underneath this I had site A, site B, and external. These could be tiers of an application, and Amsterdam external would be the overarching application as well. But I could also build policies and build zones for each one of those sub tiers in the application. So that's where you look at this and see this information out there, and this helps you to kind of start to get that visualization of those different segments. Now, ingesting all of this information I mentioned is kind of paramount. Tufin shouldn't be the source of the truth for what those zones are and what's in them, but what we should be as consumers of this. And that's actually where we look at how do we partner it out there and pull information in from other areas of the infrastructure. So this is where we're able to actually grab information from different IPAM solutions. You'll see 4 of them here. There's others on the roadmap. And you're actually able to pull those attributes and pull things like zone information based on the attribute name zone. And it's going to actually take that and auto-populate that based on the zone and info blocks. It'll pull that information into Tufin, and you'll be able to then consume that and use that in building the unified security policy. So once this information, the zones are populated, you can actually go ahead and build USPs, or unified security policies. I'll refer to them as USPs going forward. So in a USP, you're able to do several different things, and this is where you're actually going to be able to define your traffic. So between different areas of the network, you'll see I have AWS, I have backup sites in here. I have many different things in these zones. So I'm going to actually use sales to the data center as this example, and I'm going to drill into this. And you have several options in here. You can go and do things like, say, sales should not be able to talk at all to the data center. Sales should be able to allow everything to the data center, or much more consistently, you're going to actually have something that's customized. And then you have the option to build an allowable list of services or a blacklist of services. Now, because this is the policy and not the rules in production, this is what you view as acceptable, right? So this is your current view of what's acceptable in here. So if I look at the allowed list of services, I have these services. I'm also able to put additional guidelines around what these rules should look like. Can I have any in the sources, destinations, or services? Can I have explicit, can I have comments and logging, or are they required? And other additional things like how granular are the rule, and how long can a rule be unused before it becomes a violation of my corporate policy? The default unused rule reporting in Tufin is 365 days, 1 year. But we're seeing nowadays, especially in things like PCI, where you're doing a rule review every 180 days, that the last hit within day period can be much shorter. So maybe it's a public-facing DMZ, and if it doesn't get used in 30 days, you want to be notified. In PCI environments, you may set this to 180 days. And you can also set how many sources, destinations, services that you want to be able to have in an additional rule here. So you can get very granular on what you need. You can set the flow types from host to host, subnet to host, host to subnet. etc. And then the severity of this and add descriptions. You can also copy and paste cells. You can copy a cell, paste a cell configuration in here into a new cell, etc. So it becomes easier to use, and you're able to kind of visualize what that security policy looks like. Now, the challenge that most of our clients tell us is, this is great. How do I get started? And I will tell you, the first thing you're going to want to get started with is actually something a little simpler. And what you're going to want to get started with in the simplest areas is actually and this gets into kind of refining that segmentation policy, right? First things you want to do is find out, what's my risky services? So as part of this, you're actually going to go through and say, these are the things that I absolutely want to block. So I'm going to, you'll see anything from, admin to admin, and anything else to admin is going to be very limited in here. So these are the global services that I don't want to see anywhere in my infrastructure. So I'm going to create a group or a USP that has this documented with that criticality for things I don't want to see. The other thing that you're going to want to do is, as you look at this, you're going to want to build some rule properties, best practices, and these are the two that you typically start with. So in here, now I'm not focused on the services so much, but I'm focused on that rule attributes. Like, are there any in the sources, destinations, or services? Do I have comments and logging? So the first of the 3 USPs I showed you actually had all 3 of these different scenarios in it. But this is typically how you build it, as you break it apart. You have the risky services, you have the rule properties, and then the third USPs you get are the more business focused. Like, what is this application supposed to look like? What is it allowing? You're not just looking at the block list portion of that. And then once you get into that, what should that application be allowing? That's where it becomes a lot more, well, we don't really know. So we want to look and see what we have. So this is where Tufin actually gets into the security policy builder application. So what this does is it takes and it compares your USP, or unified security policy, back to your production environment, so you can actually see the differences. So one of the things you'll see in here is the conflicts. So if we wanted to look at this, I think I looked at sales. So we're going to look at P_sales. And we looked, I think, to the data center. So we'll scroll through and see this data center here, P sales to data center. And when we looked at the rules, we saw that the current cell had several things in it. It had TCP 3306, UDP 53, etc. When we looked at, so this current cell column I'm looking at here, when we looked at rule analysis, what's actually out in production, we saw that there was only SSH and HTTPS. And we had flow to subnet in the current cell. In reality, all of the rules were host to host. It has a comment. We can actually go, hey, we want to flip this to has comment enabled. Logging should be enabled, etc. And then you're going to look at how long have we gone without hits. So the last hit within 30 days, the last hit's disabled. So you can go through and build this based on what you actually have out in production. So this goes and allows you to build that security policy and to build all of those USPs in a much more efficient manner. Now, once you have all of these policies built, what you're able to do is actually get back in to the initial application, and that's where it builds all of this information back into the dashboard. So I mentioned before, you're going to have those different USPs. Now, when you come in and look at these violations, you're able to actually see, hey, I want to drill in, I want to see all my medium violations. And I can actually take a look. I'm going to be able to drill in and see, here's a rule with a medium violation. I can see my sources, destinations, services, etc. I can also get into the violations status. In this case, the service is TLS 1.0. And in this case, the security requirement was only allow SMTP and TFTP. So I can actually hover over and see, what sources are in R&D, which sources are in DC4. So I have that visibility. But the beauty of this is, am I able to refine my segmentation policy? I am. I'm able to do a couple of things with this. I'm able to actually go through, I can send this rule back to the business owner and say, hey, is this still necessary, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner? Are we still looking to keep this rule in production? I can decommission the rule altogether. So in some cases, maybe everything in here is just bad or it's not being used, and you're able to actually go through and help do this. Or when we talk about refining that segmentation policy, here's where you can actually go through and modify that rule as well. So in this case, I can go through and I can open a ticket, put it in my rule modification workflow. Maybe I need to remove a source, a destination, a service, something like that, so that I can actually go through and do those things. So when we look at that segmentation policy and refining it, it really gets into several things. The first is classifying it. It's identifying what those assets are, who owns them, identifying what needs to talk to what, who needs to talk to who, and then being able to, in the refinement piece of this, we look at how do I identify the rules that are outside the scope of this and identify those changes. So that's where we start to look at the violations and things like this.